Welcome everyone. Good evening. Welcome on behalf of the Franciscan Action Network and the Association of Franciscan Colleges and Universities to the final event in our online series, Protect Our Future, a guide to living out Laudato Si. Just a little background on the series for those of you who are joining for the first time. This year, we've been celebrating the 5th anniversary of Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si, which really has a strong emphasis on putting our ecological conversion into action, that we really need a people's movement from below, an alliance of all people of goodwill. Pope Francis asks us to live faithfully for the care for creation. And we are so grateful to all of you who are able to join us tonight. I'm going to pass it over to Janine to talk a little bit about the logistics for this evening.
Thanks, Nora. Hi, everyone. My name is Janine Walsh. I'm with Franciscan Action Network. I'm the communications coordinator. Just so everybody understands the logistics of Zoom, you're going to be muted upon entry, and we're going to keep you muted to reduce the background noise. And if anyone is watching us on Zoom, if you're joining us from Zoom, first of all, we love to see your faces. So don't be afraid to turn on your video. If you've got questions or comments, please use the chat box. And we are also broadcasting this live on Facebook. And for our friends on Facebook, we ask you to post any questions or comments in the comment section. We will be paying attention to that as well. So I'm going to shoot it back to Nora, who will get us started.
Great, thanks, Janine. I'd like to ask Debbie Haug to please start us off in prayer. Debbie is the Executive Director of Mission for the Association of Franciscan Colleges and Universities.
Great, thanks, Nora. And before we start our prayer, I always find it very helpful just to take a nice deep breath and just help us to be present here. All right, and then loving God, creator of heaven and earth and all that is in there. You created us in your image and made us stewards of all your creation of our common home. You blessed us with the sun, water, and bountiful land so that all might be nourished. Open our minds and touch our hearts so that we may attend to your gift of creation. Help us to be conscious that our common home belongs not only to us, but to all future generations, and that it is our responsibility to preserve it. Amen.
Thank you so much, Debbie. This evening, we've got a great lineup for you all. We're going to start off by introducing our guests from the organization Creation Justice Ministries. Now, the mission of Creation Justice Ministries is to educate, equip, and mobilize Christian communities, denominations, congregations, and individuals to protect, restore, and rightly share God's creation, based on the priorities of its members with a particular concern for the vulnerable and marginalized. Creation Justice Ministries provides collaborative opportunities to build ecumenical community, guides people of faith and faith communities towards eco-justice, transformations, and raises a collective witness in the public arena, echoing Christ's call for just relationships among all of creation. I'd like to welcome Annika Harley, the Political and Outreach Associate with Creation Justice Ministries, to join us in a good conversation about what all of this means for us here today. Welcome, Annika.
Thank you. Nice to be here, and thanks everyone for being here as well.
So I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about that last part of the organization's mission of raising a collective witness in the public arena, echoing Christ's call for just relationships among all creation. Can you help us understand what that looks like?
Yes. So a public witness can be so many different things. I think there's truly a public witness option for everyone. So before I explain what those can be, I'll kind of talk about the importance of why we should do that. One is, of course, because we're called by God to do so. We're called to protect the most vulnerable around us. We're called to have just relationship with all of creation. And the faith voice, broadly speaking, is a powerful voice and has a long history of beautifully working for social justice, a variety of social justice issues. I mean, I've been thinking lately about the civil rights movement, for example. The faith voice was so powerful there, and there were so many gains made within the civil rights movement. And that's just to name one movement that has benefited and been not only benefited from the faith voice, but the faith voice has been a strong, strong leader in the movement. And so now we are in a time, we've been in a time, but we are in a very critical decade where we need to be acting on climate and on environmental justice right now. So some of the ways, as you mentioned, are collective witness. So these could be, I wrote down a couple examples. You have probably seen pictures of protests where clergy are even getting arrested. And then, so that is one way, along with, going and not necessarily getting arrested, but faith groups will go and hold up their sign and say, Franciscans for climate action, things like that, and showing that they are called by God through their holy scriptures to protect creation and the most vulnerable around us. So that is a very clear and common way of collective witness, but there's other ways too. I mean, even things like writing an op-ed and people are reading it, from your faith voice about an issue dear to your heart. Things like sign-on letters for individuals and organizations, that is collective witness, bringing different Christian and other faith denominations together, or faith and secular together, to make a very powerful statement about what we care about, why we care about it, and why there needs to be change. There's things like, even I participated in some collective witness just last week, which was rogue gardening. So we planted butterfly weed along the Potomac River. I live in DC, so by the Potomac River, because it's a native plant here, and it was also a call for to clean up the Potomac River. So that was one thing that I did on my own time recently that I would consider collective witness. Also, there's something right now that I think we're in a unique time, social distancing, we're on lockdown. I think social media witness is very real and very useful right now. So there's been even virtual rallies. There might be a message set out to everyone where they say, hey, write your religious denomination, say I am a, for example, Franciscan, and this is why I care about climate action, and have a big blast where everyone posts it on that day. That is collective witness. It doesn't necessarily need to be all together in one spot. That's not always accessible, and especially right now it isn't. And so social media witness is a very real thing. And finally, the other one I'll add is office visits, visiting your local representative, your senator, and right now those can be done over the phone because it's not safe to go in. So those are all examples of collective social witness.
And thank you. And you mentioned a little bit, but can you elaborate perhaps a little bit more about why why do it at all? Does it really make that much of a difference? What are we really, do we really need to do this from a position of faith? Can you talk a little bit about that motivation?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think, as you know, we're all here, we are all people of faith, and we see God's call for us to care for creation, and not only care for it, but also justice for God's creation and God's people. And so that is in, you know, our Holy Scriptures, and it's in so many other Holy Scriptures. It is not unique to Christians. That's why there's a powerful interfaith voice on climate and environmental justice. So there's also the call to love your neighbor, and you have to care for the climate and the environment to care for your neighbor. If your neighbor lives next to an incinerator and you aren't doing anything about, you know, getting rid of the incinerator, that is not caring for your neighbor. And there's, you know, and of course there's certain areas that are more likely to have these like incinerators or dumps, places of environmental toxic sites, and those are called environmental justice sites, and they tend to be placed in communities of color, just much more often than white communities, primarily white communities. So that's important too. You have to care for, you know, you have to love thy neighbor, and that means taking action for your neighbor. Also the call to care for the next generation. As we know, we're in a critical decade where action in this decade will make a difference for generations to come. We can choose to reverse the climate crisis, or we can do nothing. And, you know, if we do nothing, that is not caring for future generations, because they will be the ones suffering. So that is kind of the why I see the faith voice needing to be spoken, but also, like I mentioned, the faith voice is powerful, and people listen to their pastors, their priests, their teachings. You know, Laudato Si, as we're talking about. Those are powerful, influential positions where people hear, listen, and learn, and then act. So there's a few different reasons why the faith voice is so necessary in the climate and environmental justice movements.
Can you share with us maybe just a couple examples of where this environmental advocacy, on the ground witnessing, created actual changes?
I would love to. So it's some very positive news as of recently. So the Great American Outdoors Act just passed the Senate and then the House, which is wonderful news because we have not been getting a ton of positive environmental bills passed lately. And so this is a huge success. It'll refund the Land and Water Conservation Fund, as well as address the backlog in park maintenance. So this is great news. And some of the ways that this was passed was through annual visits between religious community leaders and policymakers, faith-based education fact sheets on how parks relate to issues of equity, access to green space, cultural representation, collective memory formation, and spaces for Sabbath, taking ourselves and creation. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, public opinion pieces and photo campaigns. So this is a fun one that just grassroots, anyone could participate in. You take a picture of why you care for creation and post it on your social media and say, this is why creation is sacred to me, and this is why we need to refund the Great American Outdoors Act. So that was just passed recently. And then another one that is in the works right now is the Reclaim Act. And that act would clean up abandoned mine sites that have been polluting mining towns and whole regions for decades. And that recently went through the House on the recent infrastructure bill. And we have been working on that at Creation Justice Ministries and other faith, national and state-based, regional-based faith organizations, where we've done things like op-eds, we've had water gatherings where we bring people together for storytelling, for collaboration, for press, and to get people understanding why water, a big issue with mine leaching, is that it harms the water quality. And so you can't drink the water that's running down the stream next to your house, or even the water from your tap. And these gatherings will help build solidarity between people who might feel alone in the fact that they can't drink water from their own tap. And also show that, yeah, water is life. You cannot dirty someone's water. We all need water to survive. We drink it every day. It's in all the products we use. There is no way around it. And so these are some of the things that public witness, collective witness, the faith voice have all made a huge difference in, and recently.
Thank you so much, Annika. I really appreciate that. And now I'm going to welcome another guest who is someone who we have been able to meet thanks to Annika and Creation Justice Ministries. And her name is Estrella del Sagrario Luciano Moreno, a recent graduate of Cardinal Stritch University, which is an AFCU university, who participated in an alternative spring break trip the first week of March, which Creation Justice Ministries coordinated this year in Washington, D.C. The theme for the week was environmental justice and faith. They participated in educational seminars, they visited environmental justice sites, volunteered their time to help clean up the Anacostia River, and finished up the week with a visit to the representatives on Capitol Hill to discuss issues of clean water and environmental racism in Milwaukee, which is where Cardinal Stritch University is located and where Estrella has lived for the last 20 plus years. Welcome, Estrella. We're so happy to have you with us tonight.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I'm very excited to express to you all my point of view on this.
Well, why don't we start out by having you share with us maybe some of the top highlights of the week for you?
Yeah, so one of the things that we were able to do during this week on the very last day, so the entire week kind of led up to this precise thing, was going up to Capitol Hill and actually going in and talking to our representatives in Milwaukee and provide to them our ask for, we had talked about, like you said, clean water and environmental justice within Milwaukee. But that was very important to me because that was the second time that I had ever been able to do that. The first time had actually been a couple weeks before at the Catholic Social Ministry gathering. And it was the first time I did it. It was very scary. It was very intimidating. It was something that the entire time my heart was racing and I wasn't sure that I was capable of doing it. And I was going in with the group of people that I was specifically going into Capitol Hill with were strangers to me for the most part. And this time around, I felt a lot more confident. I felt a lot more informed. I had already done it and knew that I would survive it. But I was also a lot more, I had a better support group with me. And Annika was part of that support group, so thank you, Annika. But that was the biggest thing for me. It was realizing the power in the voice that you have and how empowering it is for you to realize that these people are in these positions because one way or another you elected them. They're there because they're there to serve you. In essence, they're the ones making the decisions that affect you directly, and you are their boss. And you should not feel afraid to go in there and tell them what it is that you think and how it is you feel that the soul of the United States is being affected by their decisions. And going back to one of the questions that Annika was talking about why is faith so important, it's because they're so important to us. You know, faith is what drives a lot of our motivations, what we do, how we make decisions. And if we don't give that to our representatives, if they don't have that piece of information, they're not going to know where we're rooting our values from. They're not going to realize that this isn't just a political issue. It's a people issue. It's an issue that affects our daily lives. So that was one of the biggest things that I was able to take away, is that importance to not be afraid to go and talk to your representatives about the things they are capable of changing.
And can you tell us a little bit about what it was like going to Capitol Hill? Can you walk us through what you did and how you felt before, during, afterwards?
Yeah, so the first time around, like I said, I was very afraid. There were a lot of things in my head, there were a lot of things at stake in my life. But the second time around, the just thinking about going in was still a little nerve-wracking because remembering of my past experience. But then once I was in there, we got to see Senator Tammy Baldwin, and having the ability to talk to her and for her to be attentive and respectful and to actually have her attention, even if it was for 2 minutes or 5 minutes, to have her full attention, it was definitely very empowering because you see this woman on the news, you see this woman standing up for the different things, the different bills, the different laws, the different changes that are happening in our community. And it was empowering to be in front of this powerful woman and realize that to her, I am very important, and that not only does she want to, but she has to listen to me. And then leaving with that sense of, okay, now I know that maybe maybe she's going back to her office and she's not necessarily remembering, like, okay, Estrella wants me to pass this bill, I'm gonna do it right away. But that there's a part of the words that I said to her that are going to be in her conscience, I hope, the next time that she's voting on something, or that she's deciding on something, or that she's figuring out how to split up the different economic sections of her job. And so it was definitely intimidating, but it was very empowering afterwards.
And did you all, as a group, because I know you were there with a group of students, did you all feel like there was some promise of change or some slight glimmer of hope for addressing these issues, which are very real for you all in Milwaukee? How was that experience?
Definitely. I think once we left and when we were able to get, out of the building, and when we were able to sit back down and talk amongst ourselves, we did feel that sense of yes, we were listened to. And yes, she assured us that she was going to look into it. We gave her physical papers, so she had a chance to go back and look at them. But we did feel this sense of she listened to us, and she was willing to go back and at least think about it, at least consider it, and at least have it in her mental notes that a group of young individuals as a group, and that was very important, I think, to us, because we were all there together, coming from different places in life, but from the same university, with the same set of values, with the same ask. And I think for us, that was another way of telling her that we're going there united, that we're going there not just to tell her what we think, but to ask her about the communities we live in. And I think when we left, we all had the sense of yes, that happened. She listened to us, and even if, like I said, even if she didn't do something right away, or something changed drastically in the way that the world works, it was still a sense of maybe the next time that she's there voting, that she's there deciding on something, she'll remember the young group of students that went up to her and told her that this was important to us.
Thank you. And maybe as just some final words, do you have any message for potentially other college students who might be on this call or maybe listening, who might never have tried contacting their officials before or doing this type of public witnessing? What message would you have for them?
Yeah, I think understanding that it's not just your right, but it's your responsibility to believe in your values, and to know that your values are well rooted, and then to go out into the world and let people know that these are your values, and that they root from faith, but that they express themselves in in a way of caring for all God's creation, like Annika said, and fighting for that belief and fighting for those values and fighting for that which you've been taught, which you've been wanting to live out, and that it's empowering to do that. I think for me, like I said the first time around, I was very scared. I grew up believing that, very paranoid with government officials, with police officers, with the different systems in my life that have oppressed me in different ways. And walking out of there untouched in that sense, but entirely a different person, realizing that not only is it my right, but it's my responsibility to go out there and to fight for the values that I've been instilled in and that people are counting on me to live out.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Estrella, and thank you so much, Annika. That's you both shared a lot, and we're really appreciative of all that you are both doing to promote the dignity of all of God's creation. Thank you very, very much. Right now, I'd like to share a little bit, adding on to what Estrella talked about of the Franciscan perspective. So as Franciscans and Franciscan-hearted people, we have, as we've talked about, a very special duty to advocate not only for peace, protection of creation, and the well-being and human dignity of all people, but especially those who are in a situation of poverty or in the margins in some way. But what does advocacy mean? Now, the root of the word advocare, to call out, to invoke, or intercede, that leads us into what our definition that we'd like to embrace is. And there are many definitions, especially among those who consider advocacy their full-time job. The one that we choose to embrace is one that both calls and intercedes in favor of someone or a group of people or a just cause. Not for them, rather in favor of them, with them. As people particularly inspired by the examples of St. Francis and St. Clare of Assisi, we have a rich Franciscan tradition of advocacy, calling out, invoking, or interceding in favor of someone or just cause. I'll give just two examples. The first example is St. Francis' encounter with the Sultan al-Malik al-Kamil of Egypt during the Fifth Crusade, a well-known story for many Franciscans. Just picture traveling from Italy to Egypt 800 years ago with one other person in the middle of the Crusades. Talk about being radical. Francis interceded in various ways along his journey to promote peace. And then at the Battle of Damietta, Francis tried to stop the Crusaders from attacking the Muslims, but to no avail. Once Francis and Brother Illuminato crossed over the battle line, Francis again used his voice in favor of peace when he got the chance to meet with the Sultan. In addition to the incredible example of peaceful interreligious dialogue that their encounter left for us, we also see a man moved so deeply by his love of God and God's people that he was willing to risk his very life to intercede in favor of the well-being of his fellow man and the just cause of peace. The following year, after returning from Egypt, Francis wrote a letter, which was entitled A Letter to the Rulers of the People, in which he used pretty strong and clear language to call upon all the leaders of his time to reflect and not turn away from God's commandments. This letter exemplifies Francis' practice of encouraging civil authorities to be mindful of gospel truths, as these gospel truths were what motivated Francis to intercede before those with power in favor of the just cause of the gospel message of love, mercy, peace, and justice for God's children. Now, these two incredible examples demonstrate how advocacy, advocare, interceding in favor of the well-being of God's people and creation, is really a prophetic action and one that is interwoven in the Franciscan heritage. In seeking to be a living gospel, Francis couldn't help but intercede where God's people were suffering unjustly. This Franciscan tradition we've inherited is what continues to guide our commitment to being involved in advocacy efforts today. So what is advocacy in our current time and place? It's a process. It's a strategic and deliberate process to bring about change in policies and practice, the political system or public attitudes and behavior, all while being a means to help people realize their power and give effective input in the decision-making processes that impact them. This is done by calling on leaders to make public commitments to use their power in ways that respond accurately and effectively to the needs of those affected by their decisions. Taken together, organizing and advocacy ensure that, as some say, fishermen have access to the water so that they can eat for a lifetime, rather than depending on the random acts of kindness of someone with an extra fish. Advocacy is also a means to reach a goal. It is not the end in itself. The end that we want as Franciscan-hearted people is to see all of God's creation, people, animals, plants, inanimate matter alike, existing in just relationships and able to flourish in peace. Yes, it's true that a lot has changed in the world in the last 800 years since Francis intentionally sought out ways to communicate with both religious and political leaders, but the need to do so has not changed. What are some of the ways that we, both as individuals and collectively, can follow in the footsteps of St. Francis of developing a practice of encouraging civil authorities to be mindful of gospel truths? I have here 4 simple ways that we can engage our elected officials. There's many ways. We can be very creative, of course, about how to engage those in power, but just a couple simple ways. One would be, as Annika mentioned earlier, social media, posting about a topic that you are passionate about, that you care about, and tagging your lawmakers. Another is by email. Email is very easy. It doesn't take long. We can do it every day, and we can do it from the comfort of our home during this time of the coronavirus. Another way is to call. They say that calling is the most effective way of having an impact, second to the in-person or virtual visits, which is the 4th way that I wanted to mention. Because right now, people aren't able to travel as much, it's becoming more and more common, actually, that constituents are having virtual visits with their legislators. So both on a state level and on a national level, which is really good to know. It's happening more and more. Now, one of the things that I wanted to share too is looking at Laudato Si. Now, we're in this series, right, of Laudato Si, and looking at how Pope Francis said the earth herself, burdened and laid waste, is among the most abandoned and maltreated of our poor. As we're well aware, our common home, it's in a state of emergency. The earth, our sister and mother, is crying out for relief, crying out because she's being victimized and exploited by the human family. Climate change has already been causing major destruction and suffering around the world, intensifying flooding, droughts, and impacting food systems in a major way, especially this year. The ecosystems are out of balance. The sea levels are rising, affecting millions today, and future generations will suffer even more. Christian churches, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, along with Pope Francis and the entire worldwide Catholic Church, have consistently held up the Paris Agreement as an important international mechanism to promote environmental stewardship and encourage climate change mitigation. So I'm sure you all remember the big climate conference that happened in 2015, and the big thing that came out of that was this Paris Agreement. So in that, the majority of the countries in the world agreed to address climate change with the goal of cooperatively preventing the global temperature rise. Now, to give a little background on the timeline, the USA officially joined the Paris Agreement in September 2016. In June of 2017, the following year, President Trump announced that he would withdraw the country from the Paris Agreement. 2 years later, June, the International Climate Accountability Act was introduced in the Senate, and I will talk about that more in just a moment, but it has to do with preventing the US from leaving the Paris Agreement. And then just a few months later, November 2019, President Trump sent a formal letter to the UN to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. But the Paris Agreement was designed to be very easy to join and hard to leave. It was designed that way on purpose. For that reason, the USA won't actually exit the agreement until November of this year. But unfortunately, we haven't been on track for the past 3 years. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with, how can we work to get the Paris Agreement back? How can we commit ourselves as a country to be back in the Paris Agreement? There is a bill in the Senate right now that is called the International Climate Accountability Act, and it basically prohibits the implementation of the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. And then it asks that the president annually report to Congress a plan for how the U.S. will achieve its goal to reduce greenhouse gases under the agreement. It actually has 46 co-sponsors, so almost half, and it is related to a similar bill in the Senate, in the House, which already passed. So what light does Laudato Si shine on our situation? Now, while not the all-encompassing solution, the Paris Agreement is part of a coordinated and unified response to our ecological crisis. Encouraging our senators to pass this bill, S-1743, is a recognition of our mutual connectedness. As Pope Francis said in Laudato Si, the establishment of a legal framework which can set clear boundaries and ensure the protection of ecosystems has become indispensable. He also wrote, "We lack awareness of our common origin, of our mutual belonging, and of a future to be shared with everyone." As people who strongly believe in God's presence in every part of creation, what both St. Francis and Pope Francis remind us of, and our interconnectedness as brothers and sisters with all that God created, we seek national and global leadership to address the climate emergency. Now I'd like to pass it over to Jason, who will be talking a little more about the next part of this webinar.
Great. Thank you so much, Nora. Hey, everybody. I'm Jason Miller, the Director of Campaigns and Development, the Franciscan Action Network. And it's great to see some new faces. It's great to see some old friends. And what we're going to do now is practice, right? When I'm on Capitol Hill, when my colleague, Sister Marie or Sister Maria are on Capitol Hill, you know, we're representing the Franciscan voice, but it's important for our members of Congress to hear from folks out in their districts and in their states. So they often say, well, how many members do you have in my district or in my state? You know, and they really listen to the phone calls and the emails that they get from their constituents. So people often say, oh, they're doing their thing on Capitol Hill, but it's really about all of us making that effort. And that's why tonight we're going to practice. So what we're going to do is, you saw where Nora said there are 4 things that you can do to contact your members of Congress. So let's just do a quick sort of show of hands here. There's a reaction button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you have either emailed, tweeted, called, or had a virtual or in-person meeting with your member of Congress, can you just give me a thumbs up? See 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. All right, great. So we have some veterans here. I'm glad to see that. How about, has anybody called their member of Congress or one of their senators in the last, I don't know, 6 months? Or how about in the year, in this year, 2020? Can we get another thumbs up if anyone's done that? I've done that, so I'll give a thumbs up. All right, I see Janine, thank you. Estrella, yes, you've been on the Hill and been doing the hard work. And we've heard from Estrella that, you know, the first time she did it, she was nervous, right? She wasn't with people that she knew. But then when she was with Cardinal Stritch, she was with her friends. Annika helped her. And yes, email, well, we can count email for contacting your members of Congress. Thank you. When she was with Annika and she was with Cardinal Stritch, she felt a lot more comfortable. So that's why we're here tonight. We're talking about Laudato Si. We're talking about the International Climate Accountability Act, which is a mouthful. You might just want to call it the Paris Agreement. So can everybody, and what we're going to do now is we're going to switch off the screen sharing, and so we can all see each other. I know. So what we want to do, if you're feeling even braver, put your camera on, right? We're all in this together. We're all friends. We're all part of the Franciscan family. We all want to make that phone call to our senators together. And what we're going to do is Janine is going to put our script and our phone number to the Capitol switchboard in the chat. So we're going to take a minute. There is the script to call the switchboard. And Janine, do you have this? Yes, the switchboard number is there at the top. I will say it out loud: 202-224-3121. And if you're like me, I like to cheat and Google the direct line of my senators. You might want to take a second to do that as well. So get your phones, get ready, and we're just gonna, and the good thing is we're after 5 o'clock in DC, right? So if you don't like talking on the phone, you can just leave a voicemail. I like to do that because I like to hear myself talk and I don't want to talk to anybody else. So we're just gonna leave a voicemail. You're gonna say who you are, say how you're affiliated with the Franciscan family. I usually mention your zip code. They want that to know exactly where you live. And then say that you're calling the senator to ask him or her to support S1743, the International Climate Accountability Act, which you could also just say the Paris Climate Agreement. And you want to say why, right? Because you want to support our common home, because you want to care about the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, because you believe that the U.S. needs to be a leader on climate issues. If you have a reason why you want to support that climate agreement and want to list it in the chat, go ahead right now and do that, and then pick up your phone and let's make that call. Let's do it right now. Hi, my name is Jason Miller. I'm calling from Arlington, 222. All right, it looks like everyone is wrapping up. Thanks so much. I learned that Senator Tim Kaine still does not take after-hours voicemails. So it's I did. So for folks who participated, can you just give me another thumbs up? I'd love to see how it went. How did it go? Let's see some reactions. Can we see them in the chat? I'm seeing some good thumbs up. That is great. I'm glad to see that everybody took part. Thank you. Janine, you left a voicemail. It wasn't as bad as you thought, Sabin. Exactly. That's the whole point. That's where we're practicing. That's where we're doing this together. Just like Estrella said, the first time she was like, I don't know about this, but when she was with friends, it wasn't so hard, right? It's pretty easy to pick up the phone and leave a voicemail. Diane Feinstein's voicemail is full. I'm glad to hear you're writing an email. Oh, you had a live person, Steve. That's interesting. So that's you know, and that's part of the lesson too, right? So in this pandemic time that we're in, some of our typical Capitol Hill rules are out the window. Often voicemails will be full. They might not be checking them all the time. So if you didn't get a hold of your senator, you know, you can always follow up over email. We send out email alerts from time to time, and we did have one on EPA regs. So there are different, and that's sort of that's also a pre-scripted thing. So there are other climate actions that you can take. If you join us at franciscanaction.org. I'm glad that Kalma Harris checks her voicemail often. Good, we need Ron Johnson to hear from us. I'm glad that you've gotten responses from your emails. I think sometimes those responses are the same responses they send to everyone, but that's okay. They're at least paying attention, right? So I'm glad to hear that folks took part and it wasn't as scary as folks might have thought it was. So, and yes, that's another good point. Thank you. You suspect that your New York senators have already co-sponsored. and they probably have. So usually in that case, you know, if you do talk to a live person, you can just thank them for co-sponsoring. So as much as we need our elected officials to hear from us, sometimes they need a pat on the back too. They don't always deserve it, but sometimes they do. So it's good that they have that positive reinforcement too. So great, wonderful, thanks so much. Debbie wants to know about how we can find out about other issues to call about. Nora, if you go back to the slides, can we skip ahead to the next one and then we'll go back to this? So Debbie said, well, how else can we find out about what's going on? So please sign up for the FAN newsletter. Go to franciscanaction.org. We send it out every Monday. It has scripture reflections and ways to take action. We also send out other periodic emails throughout the week. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. Check us out on social media. A lot of these things happen so quickly, right? Especially again with in our pandemic, and the Senate is having a big conversation over another bill. So a lot of these action alerts happen really quickly, and we might not be able to get an email out. So check us out on social media. So Nora, if you can take a step back, thank you. So we've taken action as a Franciscan family, and now we want to know, well, what else can we do, right? We talked about how we can tweet, we can email. Here are some other ideas. You can write a letter to the editor. You can host a virtual call party with your friends, just like we did here. Zoom calls, you can set up a Zoom account for free. The first 40 minutes are free, and it's like the old long distance or something. But you can even set up virtual office visits. Or as Nora would like to remind everyone, you can start a Franciscan solidarity table. So that's a grassroots program that we just started. We're forming tables across the country that combine Franciscan spirituality and advocacy. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely get in touch with Nora. Who else has ideas? What else can we do? How can we bring Laudato Si to our campuses and communities, and how else can we reach out to our elected officials? Can we see some ideas in the chat? Anyone else have any other ideas? If not, that's okay. Yes, Steve, yes, we definitely want to get those solidarity tables started. You can see there's a picture of me. I spoke at Chapman University last spring, just trying to bring the message of FAN across the country. There you go, Annika, taking an alternative spring break trip once COVID is over. Creation Justice Ministries and FAN would love to host any Franciscan university that wants to come to DC. That sounds amazing. We'd love to do that. And yes, you can always intern for FAN, as Nolan would like to remind everyone. We're happy to have you even virtually. All right, great. Thanks everyone for the ideas. I'm gonna now take it over to Steve and Debbie, who are gonna wrap things up.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm Steve Schneck. I'm the Executive Director of Franciscan Action Network. And this third in our series concludes our series celebrating the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si, which is in so many ways really a path-breaking encyclical from Pope Francis that speaks to I think the overwhelming crisis of our time, and that's climate change. I mean, just think, for example, about the changes that are taking place, on our planet right now, the destruction of corals, the rising of sea levels, the increasing CO2 and sulfur dioxide levels in our atmosphere, the pollution of our drinking water, and think too about the backsliding that has happened here in the United States in response, to all of these crises. Laudato Si proposes a transformation of the human spirit that's called integral ecology. And Pope Francis really believes that integral ecology is a theology for how we need to live in this new age. And so Franciscan Action Network has been especially pleased to partner with the Association of Franciscan Colleges and Universities in presenting this series. And please continue to follow Franciscan Action Network as we go through into the fall, as we continue to work on this really timely issue for our age. Thank you all very much. Debbie?
Thanks, Steve. I love talking about the Franciscan family because I think that that's who's represented here today and who has been represented, especially these past few weeks that we've done these webinars. So I'm so grateful. AFCU is on behalf of AFCU. We are grateful that we've been able to collaborate with FAN and have learned a lot of really great things. And I felt empowered calling my senator today, and it was so cool just to see everyone on their phones and being an advocate. And I just am so grateful to see so many AFCU faces throughout these past webinars, and just thank you so much.
I'd also like to take a moment to say special thanks to our guests this evening, Annika and Estrella. Thank you so much. Janine and Nora and Jason, I can never thank you three enough for all of that you've done to make this series so successful. And honestly, Debbie, none of this would have been possible without the support of you, frankly. So thanks, Debbie. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. And the Holy Spirit. I mean, come on.
And the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
And the intercession of St. Francis Sinclair.
Right, yes.
Well, in the spirit of Francis and Claire, who always maintained prayer as a constant line throughout their lives and all of the changes and upheavals and challenges that they went through, we would like to end this time together in prayer. And to do that, I'd like to invite one of our FAN interns, Sarah Doyle, to lead us in prayer.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you again to all the speakers. It was really impactful to hear what everyone had to say and to see everyone call their senators. Very inspiring stuff. All right, let us pray. Loving God, may we help each person secure the food and resources that they need. Be present to those in need in these trying times, especially the poorest and those most at risk of being left behind. Transform our fear, anxiety, and feelings of isolation into hope, so that we may experience a true conversion of the heart. Help us to show creative solidarity in addressing the consequences of this global pandemic. Make us courageous to embrace the changes that are needed in search of the common good. Now more than ever, may we feel that we are all interconnected in our efforts to lift up the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. We make our prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the Father, and Son, and Holy Spirit.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all for being with us tonight. May you go in peace, and thank you so much. Peace and all good. Good night.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.